So we've all heard the expression, it's not rocket science, but sometimes it actually is. That's what we found at National Geographic as we had our 3D VR camera space rated and as we attempted the task of getting on payload to reach the International Space Station. We couldn't have done any of that work without the amazing support and guidance from CASIS, and I especially want to thank Mike Reed and his whole team for their help. That 3D VR film was shot as an extension of our landmark television series, One Strange Rock, from Darren Aronofsky, which I'm going to talk about shortly as it inspires the conversation on the future of sustainability this afternoon. Before we talk about One Strange Rock, I wanted to provide a quick snapshot of National Geographic's sustainability efforts on a number of fronts. For over 130 years, National Geographic has been funding science and exploration on every continent of the planet, including outer space. We fittingly call our grant recipients explorers. Our National Geographic explorers number in the thousands. They're an activated community out in the world making significant contributions across the spectrum of science and innovation, culture and exploration, and of course, sustainability. At National Geographic, explorers are our bedrock. One of the key requirements to be an explorer is that you go out, you do your work, and then you must come back and tell us about that work. Exploration and discovery is truly meaningless if nobody knows about it. How can we wonder at, collectively, and celebrate our achievements if there's no record? How can we learn to innovate, adapt, and tackle the challenges we're faced as a species? We need to share the work of our National Geographic explorers and explorers worldwide, just like National Geographic explorer Arthur Wang. Arthur built 2 portable solar-powered recycling plants and is bringing them to far-flung places like the Tibetan Plateau. His trash presso machine turns plastic waste into small tiles that can be used to build walls and floors. His company, MiniWiz, is devoted to building a circular economy and looking at something like packaging as a commodity. Sharing the work of explorers like Arthur is the foundation of National Geographic. All of our media outlets, the magazine that everybody's so familiar with, our TV channels, whom I have the pleasure of working for, and of course our digital platforms, including proudly the #1 non-celebrity Instagram account in the whole world. I do want to issue a warning to Selena Gomez. We're coming for you. Nat Geo's coming for you. She's #1. Explorer is a word I hear every single day at National Geographic. And what's exciting to me is to know that there's a community of people out in the world hungry for knowledge, hungry for understanding and looking for answers to complex problems. Because at the heart of every exploration is a big question. Our species is currently faced with a massive question that demands collective exploration. How can we create a truly sustainable future on this planet? In addition to the amazing work of many National Geographic explorers, sustainability for National Geographic comes in many forms, other forms. Planet or Plastic is an initiative that we launched this past spring. It's a one-brand, purpose-led initiative with a vision to significantly reduce the amount of single-use plastic that reaches the ocean. We're taking a leadership role in the plastics issue by harnessing the influence of National Geographic's global multi-platform reach and our scientific expertise in an effort to reverse the growing trend of single-use plastic and their deployment into the oceans. We've had an overwhelming response to our June issue of the magazine, featuring a plastic bag dressed as an iceberg, a poignant illustration of a multi-layered and very complicated issue. Our media assets are working alongside the National Geographic Society to get to the root of the problem, upstream, where rivers are emptying plastics into the ocean. And in a shameless ploy, we're open for business to work with companies and organizations who want to spread the word and engage the public in steps toward a solution. Sustainability, as we all know, begins with awareness, but it's not just about awareness. And obviously, it's not just plastics. On a macro level, sustainability efforts must include air, energy, water, biodiversity, which includes food and even textiles. In a moment, we're going to have an opportunity to hear the exciting efforts of Sarah Thorson and the Target Corporation, and how they're using the International Space Station to tackle cotton sustainability head-on with their ISS Cotton Sustainability Challenge. The clip that I'm going to show in just a moment represents the power of the medium of film, the power and the bold mission of National Geographic, and a massively successful partnership forged with CASIS and the ISS, and filmmaker Darren Aronofsky, production partners at Newtopia, and my colleagues at National Geographic Channel. One Strange Rock is a TV series, a 10-part TV series that launched this last spring. It is the amazing story of our singular home, Earth, told by the only people who have ever left it, astronauts. Our collaboration with CASIS and the ISS created opportunities for astronaut Paolo Nespoli to be trained by Darren himself ahead of his current stay on the ISS. During his mission in space, he recorded exclusive footage for this program. CASIS provided critical support to National Geographic in arrangements to get the VR 3D camera on board the payload to ISS. If you'd like to see that piece, by the way, I think the piece on YouTube is called The First 3D VR Production in Space, or something to that effect. It's a really clever name, actually. I'll find out what it is and we can share it around. It's really pretty special if you've got some goggles. CASIS were instrumental in the timing so we could get our space rating done with nanoracks and get the camera launched from Wallops Island in October, so Paolo, who had been there since August, could film for 4 to 5 weeks and send back data to download. CASIS and ISS were very helpful to allow crew time for him to shoot and download to Johnson Space Center. As we expand to a 10 billion person strong planet by 2050, becoming sustainable is one of our highest priorities. And it's going to require total buy-in from everyone who lives right here. So what's that going to take? Well, for starters, maybe everyone needs to take a trip up to the ISS to get a big dose of perspective of our collective home. This is One Strange Rock.
I'm not sure whether I feel more like an Earthling or a spacewoman. I think being a spacewoman's a lot more fun.
When I got home from space after getting out of my suit, then to have a meal without the food floating away from you and being able to pet your dog and talk to your parents face to face, it made me feel so much more connected to the planet.
You know, after that space experience, being back on the planet, I think what really skyrocketed in me
caterpillar doesn't know the world beyond the leaf it crawls on. But once it becomes a butterfly, it can take to the skies. And from up high, its view of home changes forever. An astronaut will have trained for at least 3 years for a mission. Every moment in space is scheduled with experiments to run and tasks to complete. But the first thing they want to do is exactly what we do when we go somewhere new. Check out the view.
found that sense of color, brightness, richness of everything. The Earth just seems to glow. It's so beautiful.
When I first went to space, the first thing I wanted to do was pop off my helmet, unstrap out of my chair, float up weightless, and go to the window and see the world.
Every day, I think about what it was like to view the planet from space.
What we see with our eyes, what we then, I think, feel through our hearts as you're experiencing it it's beyond imagination.
It is just so stunningly beautiful. It almost makes you want to find new words to describe the emotion that you're feeling because it affects you so powerfully.
Seeing Earth from space transforms all astronauts. They undergo a metamorphosis. They call it the overview effect.
I don't think about the city I live in or where I'm from. I think about home now as our whole planet, our whole Earth. It's one home for all of us.
In a sense, the planet is its own little spacecraft, and we're all astronauts here on Earth.
Thank you very much. I would like to introduce our esteemed panel here today to talk about exploring the future of sustainability on Earth and off the Earth. Please join me in welcoming, on the next page, Sarah Thorson, Vice President, Chief of Staff, Strategy and Innovation, Product Design and Development, the Target Corporation. Hi, Sarah. Nice to see you. Cynthia Buteau, Director, Commercial Innovation at CASIS. Hello. And astronaut Rick Mastracchio, the Senior Director of Flight Operations for Commercial Resupply Services at Northrop Grumman Innovation Systems, one of the two companies that NASA presently has tasked with resupplying the International Space Station with critical supplies and research. However, prior to that role, Rick was an accomplished NASA astronaut, having spent 228 days in space, living and working in the orbiting laboratory. What was that like?
What was that like? Yeah. How many hours do we have to answer that question?
Yeah, right?
That's a tough question to answer. Like your video said, you get a different perspective when you go into low Earth orbit. And the analogy I use is that when you leave your hometown and you go to a different state and people talk to you, you say, oh, I'm from Texas, my home is in California, my home is in Virginia. Then when you leave the country, you say, oh, I live in the United States, or my home is in Japan, my home's in Canada. Now, you're in low Earth orbit. So now the Earth becomes your home. And that's just something that is kind of embedded in you from now on. The way you think it, so you want to protect it, you feel loyal to it, you want to embrace the whole Earth as your home. So it changes the way you think.
Did you have a moment? A single moment, like Chris Hadfield and Peggy Whitson were talking about?
I don't think I had a moment, but I think it kind of sinks in. Maybe I'm a little denser and it takes a little more time to get in. But my first 3 missions were space shuttle missions, and those are sprints. You get up on orbit, and like Chris Hadfield said, or whoever said it, said, you rip off your spacesuit and you get to work, and you work and work and work and do nothing but work and sleep until it's time to deorbit, and you come home, and you kind of look back and say, oh, I was in space. I should have took a few moments to enjoy it. But when you live up there on the space station for 188 days, you have a lot more downtime. On Sundays, you get to look out the window. You get to kind of embrace what you're seeing below. And so I think it sinks in over time. For me, it did. Yeah.
Did you have hobbies in space?
Did I have hobbies in space? Yeah, you find things to do. Yeah.
I'm off book. This is an off book conversation.
You have to find things to do. The biggest hobby of what most astronauts take up is looking at the Earth. As astronauts, we work our whole lives to become astronauts, it seems like, and then we work our whole careers to get off the planet. And what's the first thing everyone does when they get off the planet? They turn around, they look back at the planet. and it's beautiful. Every time you look out the window, it's something incredible. It's something different, something more beautiful than the last time you looked out the window.
There's a moment in the series where Chris Hadfield talks about he goes outside for his first spacewalk, I guess, and he's got his hand on a bar. He's holding a bar and he's got a tether. He talks about the first moment of releasing his hand and trusting that tether. And the whole world, all of history, all of his life, and all of history, 4 million plus years, or billion plus years, are below him. And the entirety of outer space and all of that history is behind him. And he sets that stage so beautifully. It really is awe-inspiring.
Yeah, it's a great feeling. Yeah.
Was there anything, do you have a most incredible or inspiring thing that you were able to see from space?
It's hard to pick one thing. Like I said, every time you look out the window, it's incredible. But really the best views when you're up in low Earth orbit are while you're doing a spacewalk. The second best views, I say, are from the cupola. The cupola is it's basically a glass bottom boat on the world where you could see for thousands and thousands of miles. And my crewmates and I, Koichi Wakata, Mike Hopkins, we spent many months together on board the space station. We would spend hours in the cupola before bedtime looking out, and there'd be many nights where the aurora borealis would be just below us. We'd be kind of flying through it, and then Venus would rise up through it, and then the moon would rise up through it, and we would just be in awe. It was like God was showing off for us. So there are many moments like that you can describe when you spend so much time on orbit.
Wow. Was there anything that was concerning to you? Was there anything concerning? Oh. I mean, we're talking about sustainability today.
Yeah.
Sustainability it's a challenge in front of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, there's different levels of concern. I can remember when I was out on a spacewalk, you're crawling around out there, and I saw what I call bullet holes in the side of the structures of the space station from orbital debris or from a micrometeor. That's very concerning when you're out doing a spacewalk in a somewhat flimsy spacesuit. But, when you're inside the safety of the space station looking down, the most dramatic things you see are from Mother Nature. Those are the things that you see in the short term. You see huge hurricanes. One shuttle mission we actually had to come home early because they were thinking of evacuating Houston, the Johnson Space Center. So we had to actually land early because there was a huge hurricane heading towards Houston. That was the days of Katrina and that time frame. But it really, from a longer term perspective, even though you're up there for 6 months, it's not easy to discern the differences over time because of the seasons, the way the seasons change. When I was up there for the 188 days, that was the first time I was ever up there for a winter. And I tell you, it was a really cold winter in the Northeast that year. And I looked down at the whole Northeast. I think the Great Lakes were frozen, Chicago, New York, everything was just rocks and ice. And I was wondering, how do people survive down there? It's incredible what you see from so far away. But you do see immediate effects of things like deforestation, and you see strip mines and things like that, and those can be concerning depending on your perspective. But really, I think it's the long-term thing that we have to look, the long-term plan. Those are the things we have to really watch closely.
Right. Cynthia, why use the space station for sustainability?
So I was actually thinking, as Rick was just talking, I think and with the video that you showed, when astronauts leave the planet and the work that you're doing to really show the love and the respect for the planet and the imagery, I think is phenomenal. But ultimately, the International Space Station in low Earth orbit is also an innovation platform that allows you to use the elements of microgravity, the extreme conditions of space, the debris impact that Rick just talked about, and using the ISS as a big satellite bus for remote sensing applications. And the work that we're doing in sustainability, whether that be oceans, water, or emissions, air quality, those types of things, actually can be addressed by use of one of those elements that I just talked about, using the ISS as a national lab to solve these big common sustainability type challenges, which probably leads us to Target, who took great advantage of that.
Right. Sarah, can you talk about Target's approach to sustainability?
Absolutely. For those of you that don't know, Target opened its first doors in 1962, and Target has had a long-term commitment and investment to both social and environmental sustainability efforts. We continually use it as one of our main principles to make all of our decisions across our business to make sure that we're doing the right things across the entire company for the guests, the community, and for the planet. Through our corporate responsibility report, which our annual report just came out last week, for those of you that haven't seen it yet, we really ground ourselves across 4 key pillars that allow us to really double down our efforts and make sure that we're making the right decisions for a better tomorrow. Those pillars include serving our guests through everything that we do in product and services, and really empowering our teams and making sure that globally we have the right programs in place to make sure that our team members and workers can thrive and survive. And fostering our communities, whether that be through really strong volunteer programs and really enabling economic growth within our communities through different programs. And then last but not least is really designing for tomorrow. And that's where I think our team, that's the one I'm closest to, I should say, within product design and development. So an example of that would be our own brands. We design and develop and source all of our own brands at Target. And we've been developing several new own brands recently. And in order to do that, we've really used sustainability to be at the forefront of what's going to be important to the guest and how we build the brand. So an example of that is Cloud Island. It's a baby line that we launched about 1.5 years ago. And it spans across layette, toys, home textiles, and nursery products. And as we were doing some robust guest research for the brand, we realized that safety and impact were the 2 most important things to the guest, as she really cares what she puts in, on, and around her baby, as well as what is the future going to look like for her baby. So we built that brand with safety and impact as the 2 main core values of the brand, and we were able to have all of the textile products be 100% Okotex certified, as well as utilizing sustainable cotton where possible, and we're working towards a goal of 100%. The other thing that I'd just like to mention is in 2016, we came out with our 9 focuses for our corporate sustainability focus areas. Those focus areas are grounded in 3 pillars of net positive manufacturing, really looking at sustainable raw materials and how do we source those appropriately, and worker well-being globally. So the one I'm most excited to talk about today is the raw materials piece. Last year, we were able to create and publicly announce policies and goals around cotton, recycled poly, and forest. And within cotton, we've made a commitment to have 100% sustainable cotton sourced for all of our own brand products by 2022. We have a long way to go, but we've made a lot of progress. But one of the things that we've realized in the last couple of years is that we have to put more funding into R&D efforts in order to really achieve our goals. So within the global fashion agenda, we've committed to use and invest $1 million into textile recycling technologies. And we have a company called Evernew that we're an early adopter and investor with that is in full R&D sprint right now on how to really create a brand new fiber that would allow us to 100% recycle both cotton and polyester, which would get us into true circularity, as well as other brands and retailers to propel our efforts. So that's something I'm very excited about.
Congratulations. And thank you on behalf of the planet.
Yes, on behalf of the planet.
How did Target get involved at the space station?
Well, CASIS actually approached Target in 2016, I believe it was, and the team was kind of going back and forth on different ideas, and it went from how do we test outdoor furniture and swimsuits to all sorts of different ideas. But
Rick, would you have liked to have been on that mission?
Yeah.
Maybe the outdoor furniture.
Safe. But eventually, we landed on being able to set out a challenge that if you were given $1 million to do any research on the International Space Station to improve cotton sustainability production, what would you do? And we got 42 submissions, which was more than we thought. And we narrowed it to 7 with the hopes of being able to fund 1 or 2. And eventually, we actually ended up funding 3 with the help of CASIS coming in with some additional funding at the last minute. So the 3 companies that we are now getting ready to scope out and get to the actual experiments are Upstream Tech, University of Wisconsin-Madison, and Clemson University.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I would just add to what Sarah is saying in that, you know, when we first started our conversations with you, we were talking about your research priorities. And it was during one of these brainstorming sessions where somebody said, and I think it was Jeremy said, it takes 700 gallons of water to produce 1 cotton t-shirt. And that took us into a whole different level of discussion on what types of solutions could there be to achieve more, or to achieve cotton sustainability. That could range from microgravity, looking at plant growth, the root growth systems, looking at genomics and gene breeding, looking at all sorts of things related to the raw materials as you're talking about. We also looked at water systems, filters, the way that you could optimize that sort of technology related to cotton production. And then lastly, it was the remote sensing side of the house. What sorts of applications could local farmers use to better manage their cotton production? And when we issued this challenge, we left it as broad as possible so that any one of those solutions could be achieved. And I think to Sarah's point, the types of solutions that came in of those 42 submissions were really broad, they were all over the place, and they were really great. We had so many great ideas, again, using the phenomena of microgravity, the extreme conditions of space, or the vantage point to solve this Earth-based problem. And the 3 winners, I think we're all really happy with because they span the gamut in terms of the types of solutions. And it's amazing because when you first start these discussions about how do you use the International Space Station, how do you use those unique one-of-a-kind conditions to solve Earth-based problems, you know, people just don't connect those dots. But it truly is an innovation platform where when open to this open innovation model, the sponsored program model, we truly can make, you know, great strides together in partnership.
Excellent. Congratulations. It sounds like, we were talking briefly down there during lunch, the timelines currently. You've just announced the 3.
We've just announced the 3 that we're moving forward with. And I should also mention that one of the pieces of criteria as we were going through it was that Target would help invest in this and fund it, but any of the learnings had to be publicly available to anybody that could learn at any type of agriculture, not just for cotton. But that was actually one of our biggest sets of criteria, and CASIS was so great about hearing all the things that we wanted to include in the actual experiment.
And the other thing is you cared about, you know, this happening in our lifetime. So they were looking for solutions that could be implemented by local farmers in a relatively short period of time. And the 3 winners, they sort of span that complexity. I think the shortest one is going to be operational in 6 months from the time that we start the development, where the most complex could be 18 months until we actually see a project. But ultimately, you know, that the timeline really does relate to the complexity and what type of work you're doing and what type of design needs to take place. But the open innovation model, the sponsored program model that we're talking about, is really, you know, how do we take account of your goals using this unique asset to benefit, you know, to benefit as many folks back here on the Earth as possible. And I think, you know, hats off to Target, because really you were just incredible in checking off every box in terms of really looking at this from what are the things we can do to better things here on Earth.
Great.
This is no small undertaking either. How many stores are we talking about, Target?
Well, we have 1,800 US retail stores. We have a global impact around the world because we have global sourcing and IT worldwide offices. So our reach does stretch beyond our US setup in retail. But a lot of our global efforts are production, particularly of the raw materials I talked about, as well as a lot of our worker well-being programs are more of a global program.
Wow. Well, thank you again for those efforts, and we look forward to following them.
Yeah, we look forward to what we're going to learn from them.
Right. And has this effort, how long have you been working on rolling this out, asking for submissions and reviewing them and so on?
Well, our initial conversations was 2016, but I would say most of the efforts have occurred over the last 12 months.
Yeah, we kicked off the program. Actually, we announced it at last year's ISSRD conference. The actual competition kicked off in September of last year. And we chose the winners in conjunction with Earth Day, which I believe was April of this year. So again, the competition, where a lot of what we have to do is educate researchers that might be focused on ground-based applications for cotton, but have no idea what it means in low Earth orbit. So a lot of what we had to do is webinars and education and really making that translation for, how do you do it here on the ground versus what could you achieve up in, using these elements. We actually had a workshop yesterday on sustainability where we had a whole broad range of folks that are sitting here in this conference today. And again, we went through the same thing. What are our common challenges around sustainability, and how could we use the International Space Station to create consortium partnerships to solve those problems? So we're working, we're using Target as our beacon, and I think we're looking at doing even more. What are the additional sustainability programs that we could launch? What are the additional consortia we can build, public-private partnerships, to deal with water sustainability or environmental issues or air quality, all of the things that you mentioned originally.
Right. We had talked at lunch a little bit too, Cynthia. I was actually very surprised to hear that Cases came in and contributed some money. Originally Targeted pledged $1 million. And choosing these three, I guess, winners, as it were, that was more than $1 million. How is CASIS able to contribute?
Well, we do have seed funding to support projects, and I think we heard from some of the previous panels today, that's part of our mission is to seed some of this work, especially when we have this partnership model where Target put in $1 million and we had such great projects that we didn't want to see us not move forward with all three because of that. So that we did contribute. I would also add that NASA is a huge partner in this, and they are extremely supportive when we have these sponsored program partnership models where they are an equal partner in all of this support for bringing these great science and technology projects to station.
And you had said there's a bit of right now in particular is a great time for people to get involved. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think, again, we heard on the previous panel where people were talking about the great subsidy. Yes, we have a little bit of seed funding to support. NASA does help as well. But right now, 100% of launch costs are completely subsidized. So that when we're out and we're talking with folks, this is a great time to use this incredible asset. Excellent.
What are other organizations starting to look at? And where are the other opportunities?
Yeah, so it was interesting. Again, I keep going back to this last panel, which I thought was fabulous with Delta Faucet and Bigelow and Goodyear. If you look at what Goodyear and Delta Faucet are doing for their projects, yes, they're doing projects that impact their portfolio, but you could call both of those sustainability projects. They're looking at better silica morphologies for tires that are going to result in lower emissions for when you drive your car. Delta Faucet is looking at shower heads, but they're looking at this on-chip technology, droplet formation, so that you can feel wetter with less water. Again, conservation of water. So we're seeing those types of projects. We're seeing things across the board in terms of how do we look at water efficiency, and that could be microgravity driven, like with droplet formation or understanding membranes and those types of things. In partnership with NASA, with Sam Shamimi, I think, who's sitting here in the audience, we're looking ahead towards working with NOAA as part of their ocean sustainability conference that's taking place in October. So a lot of the work that we're doing here during this conference, it's a call to action. It's not just talking, it's what types of things can we tangibly put in place and then take it to this next, working with NOAA, working with the Oceans Conference, so that we are dealing with things like plastics and drought efficiency with water tables, with farmers, those types of things that you can use remote sensing, microgravity, or the extreme conditions to solve.
Rick, we have you to thank for a lot of this. From what I understand, your time in space, you did spend time bolting together the space station itself.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to be a small part of the construction of the International Space Station on my space shuttle missions, and then I got to live there just a few years back.
So would you have been, and this might be an obvious question, I work for National Geographic, I don't necessarily live and breathe ISS cases and space all day long, but would you have been an astronaut up there, the recipient of, or the person conducting these experiments for somebody like Target?
Oh, yeah. I mean, every astronaut is part of many of these experiments that go on. There's three types, I always categorize it, there's three types of experiments on board the International Space Station. The first type is where the astronauts are the experiment. They're taking blood samples, urine samples, we're ultrasounding our eyeballs and our spines and things like that. The second type is where we're research technicians. The PIs, the scientists are on the ground, and we're up there, we're their hands in operating their experiments. And then the third type is where we really just maintain the International Space Station. We maintain the power, the cooling, so that experiments that do not require our interaction can run successfully and be commanded from the ground by the scientists or the ground control team. And of course, at any time, any expedition that's up there, there's hundreds of experiments going on at the same time. So yeah, it was fun to work with.
Neat. Yeah, that's really neat. There was one of the submissions that you were telling me about wasn't chosen because it couldn't go to space or didn't need to go to space. Could you tell me a little bit about that one?
This was the Girl Scouts.
The Girl Scouts. The Girl Scouts submitted a...
Yeah, so we had a submission from a Girl Scout troop in California of a 10-year-old troop that wanted to learn more about how to potentially use salt water to grow cotton. And because their experiment didn't necessarily need the International Space Station, we had sent them we were about to send them a nice letter with cases saying that they wouldn't be moving to the next round of submissions. But after a lot of discussion between our team at Target and CASIS, we found a way to fund that project for them so they could continue on with their experiment. And CASIS was absolutely amazing at sending them the equipment that they needed to actually learn how to grow this potentially with salt water as being a solution, as well as put them in touch with one of their NASA researchers to help them through their project. So I thought that was just incredible, and they were very, very excited to get that letter.
Cynthia, this is, This is a little off book too, but is there anybody in the audience who could calculate the cost of sending a box of Girl Scout cookies to space? Because I think there's some people up there who might really enjoy that, right? So this is really a question for all of us. We're curious, I'm curious, what more can we be doing as individuals and as organizations toward a sustainable planet? I know National Geographic, when we launched Planet or Plastic in the spring, it seemed like a small gesture. We're only a couple hundred people, but we have begun the process of phasing out plastics internally. And I remember one day, one of our coordinators walking through the office and handing us all metal straws in a little satchel. And now I've got a metal straw in the cup holder that holds all my pens. And I pull it out, and I use it, and I clean it, and I put it back, and so on. So it's sometimes the little things. I'd be curious if you have any insight, any thoughts in that direction as well.
I'll start because yesterday when we left our sustainability workshop, we sort of discussed the fact that a lot of times you come to conferences and you talk and you feel good talking about things and you have these great ideas, but then you leave the conference and nothing much happens. And so how do you actually get this call to action? How do you tangibly walk away with something that you're going to do? And so for us, this Target-like sponsored program model where we use the space station to help solve this big problem, where we actually tangibly bring together the right parties, the funders, the solution providers, all of the different groups that are needed, is a great first step to sort of crack open that door that then can bring in the awareness, the various other actions that need to take place after that. So I think we're pretty focused on not just walking away from this conference talking about it, but literally having a tangible program that we can then bring to the NOAA conference in October and continue this action where there's something tangible that's happening as a result of this talk.
Great.
I would agree with that. And just to add on the action part, it's really important, and of course I'm coming from a very large corporation, so it might be different for some of you, but it's really important in our line of work to make sure that we're focusing on what we can do today with what we have, but be super curious and always push the needle on what we're gonna need for tomorrow. So ensuring that we have the right policies and the teams are working on, designing and developing the right products based on what's available to them today is a huge focus. But these R&D efforts are going to be so much more important to us in 3, 5, 10 years from now. And if we can also be curious and clear the path to make sure that those can continue to move forward, I think it's critical to the success of the entire planet.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, and the easy solution is what we've all been taught for many years now is to, I think as individuals, we need to reduce, we need to reuse, and we need to recycle. Of course, now you have the second order effect when the corporations start doing that and then the individuals start doing that, of course you get more savings. And then the next step is to then, of course, use some of this great research to even reduce and our use of resources even more so. But I think the first step of that's pretty straightforward for individuals, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I almost came up here with a plastic Nalgene bottle. I carry this thing around, and again, it feels very micro on some level in contrast to, say, Target or what we're doing up in space. But just stopping the single-use plastics on my end as well. What can the research and development community be doing more of to protect the planet, make sustainability sustainable? We have a growing population. Is there in the rollout of the cotton sustainability, how do you call it internally exactly?
We call it the Cotton Sustainability Challenge.
Right. So in the role,
it doesn't have an acronym yet, but I'm sure it will in the near future.
We could come up with one today. So in the rollout of that, in the planning and the strategy, the long term, are you looking at, we've got a population of X today. Are you looking down the road 5, 10, 20 years as well to help the curve?
We absolutely will be. I think until we actually get the experiments off the ground and start to understand what we're learning, I'm not quite sure what that's going to look like. We do know that in order to get to our 2020 100% sustainable cotton goal, we have some more work to do both internally and with our vendors. And so we have lots of programs in place.
That's tomorrow.
There, I know. And like I said, we've made great progress, but we need to go a little further and a little faster. We have a lot of our toes dipped in a lot of different R&D efforts across multiple raw materials, not just cotton. And hopefully we'll be able to learn from all those different R&D programs to understand what does it need to look like in the future and where do we need to double down versus pause on something we thought was going to happen, but as you learn, you constantly have to kind of shift your focus to what your learnings tell you.
Right, right. Cynthia, Rick?
Well, so like I said many times, there's hundreds of experiments being done on board the space station at any time. And if you look back at the history a little bit, let's just take recycling water. On board my space shuttle missions, the urine tanks would get filled up and we would just dump it overboard. And it would look like a snowstorm outside the side of the space shuttle. It was beautiful. You get to space station and you can't do that anymore. It doesn't make sense. So eventually we got to the point where we're recycling the wastewater. And that's fantastic. And of course, and they're working at a 90% rate. And now when we go to Mars, we need to get to even a bit higher recycling rate to get to 98%. But I'd like to see that technology come down to Earth. I mean, this is very specialized equipment, probably very expensive equipment, very specialized, like I said, but we need to get that technology to work here on Earth. Imagine if you had a device at your house that recycles 90% of your water, your wastewater. That would be fantastic. So I would love to see things like that.
Mm-hmm. And I would just add, I think it gets back to, looking at these common problems that transcend multiple industries, verticals, and having researchers come together in partnership with whether it be the government or other funding agencies or the right sorts of consortia partners that can then look at solving these big common problems together. And again, from our standpoint, it would be great if solving those big common problems involves using this space station as that incredible innovation platform.
Rick, as we said, you took part in building and operating the space station. From your perspective, what has been the ISS's greatest contribution so far?
Oh, wow, that's tough.
Or
well,
what's next for it to accomplish?
Well, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people in this room might agree, I think the International Space Station is the greatest engineering achievement in the history of mankind. That's my opinion. Imagine tens of thousands of people all around the world got together, built this, launched from different countries, assembled in orbit by international astronauts, operated by international ground teams. And now it's a fully operational orbiting laboratory, hundreds of experiments being run from all around the world. And it has the potential to enable us to get to Mars. It has the potential to save lives and make life better here on Earth. The potential is unlimited. But I think the greatest achievement is the fact that it has brought the world together to solve the world's problems. And I think that's the best way to say that.
Nicely put. We have just about 10 more minutes. I'm not sure if anybody's submitted questions, but we would happily take a couple of questions. I'd like to close ultimately with, I have 3 more minutes of TV I'd like for you to watch. Because TV ain't going anywhere, people. I know the internet is here to stay, but it's not going anywhere. Do we have any questions that have come through that people wanted to ask our panelists?
Yes, we've got a few. So we're here in Silicon Valley. What role can Silicon Valley community play in advancing sustainability efforts?
What can Silicon Valley do?
What role can Silicon Valley play in contributing toward sustainability efforts? Is that right?
Yeah, that's an easy one. Look at cell phones. How wasteful are those? How many cell phones, laptops, computers, televisions end up in landfills? There's a
E-waste.
problem waiting for a solution. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think Silicon Valley, let me start by saying I am from Boston, so other than Boston, I think Silicon Valley is the epicenter of innovation. And I mean, ultimately the solutions are here, and the researchers are here, and the funding is here. So to me, this is the place to begin the formation of these big partnerships and consortia that can solve these big problems. And one of the winners, Upstream Technologies, actually has they're Boston and they're Silicon Valley based. So they're here.
Any other questions?
Is related to remote sensing. So obviously remote sensing, looking at our planet's important. What kind of platforms are now available on the space station that people can use?
What type of remote sensing platforms are currently available on the space station?
So the remote sensing applications, I mean, right now there's things like the ability to do hyperspectral analysis, or it's coming back on board, or to look at ship tracking through an AIS antenna. We've got different types of water and sort of geography type sensors on the NASA side of the house. So there's a lot of data that's available coming from sensors that currently exist on station, but we're also looking at new companies and new types of remote sensing applications that can be flown on our existing external platforms. So we've got a number of external platforms, whether it be the NanoRacks external platform, the Teledyne Brown Muses platform, we have Alpha Space and the Missy platform, where we're able to fly and to test remote sensing applications, many of which could be these types of solutions for water sustainability or other types of sustainability.
And you have lots of astronauts with cameras. So they love looking out the window.
Right.
Give them something to do.
That gives me some job security as well, I think. Yeah. Why don't we take one more question and then we can play the clip and adjourn the session.
Can space and ISS help us prepare for the rising of ocean levels?
That's a good question.
So I think that was definitely one of the things that we talked about. That's definitely going to be addressed in the NOAA conference in October. Rising ocean levels and looking at all of that phenomena, that's something that I know NOAA very much focuses on from an organizational standpoint. And again, using the ISS as a remote sensing or the vantage point to detect these various elements, whether it be through remote sensing or through other other types of technology that can assess that, track that, have sort of the right sorts of measurement systems in place. But yes, that is definitely one of the areas that we're focused on from a sustainability standpoint.
Excellent. So before we wrap up, before I show this final clip, I just wanted to see if anybody actually did take the opportunity to calculate the cost of a box of Girl Scout cookies being sent to space. Anyone?
Somebody has to know.
Oh, what a missed opportunity. Anyhow, I do, before we watch the clip, I want to thank Cynthia, I want to thank Rick, and I want to thank Sarah for spending the time up here with us today. We really appreciate it. Thank you. And a final shameless plug, One Strange Rock aired this spring on National Geographic Channel. I and my colleagues are thrilled to say that we'll be making a part 2. A stranger rock, I don't know what we'll call it yet, but we're getting there. So with that, we have just another 3-minute clip. You saw a 20-second preview of that at the top of the show. So it might be a little redundant at that point, but why don't we all step off the stage and go watch.
Great.
Thanks everyone very much.
Thank you.
I'm not sure whether I feel more like an Earthling or a spacewoman. I think being a spacewoman's a lot more fun.
When I got home from space after getting out of my suit, then to have a meal without the food floating away from you and being able to pet your dog and talk to your parents face to face, it made me feel so much more connected to the planet.
After that space experience, being back on the planet, I think what really skyrocketed in me is just gratitude. How good we have it on the Earth.
I couldn't wait to feel what a breeze would be like again. What the smell of grass was gonna, smell like again.
It's the smell of Earth, the smell of home, the smells of the natural world. It's overpowering, it's kind of overwhelming.
Just because you physically leave the surface of the Earth does not mean you leave the Earth, because the Earth is part of you.
I think we're pretty special. Yeah, we might be small in comparison to the rest of that universe, but I dare anybody from any other planet to come up with a place as nice as ours. I think we definitely have the nicest home on the block.
This is our home. The Earth it's the only place we've got. It is one strange rock because it's ours and we are here, and we don't know of any other place in the universe yet that can support life. We're very lucky to have it as our home.
There's no place like home.
There is no place like home.
There's definitely no place like home.
For thousands of years, maybe tens of thousands, we've looked up and asked questions. Now, for the first time in history, we have the opportunity to look down. The questions are different, and so are the answers. We can now literally see how fortunate we are to call this place home. It's complex, calibrated, interconnected, fine-tuned, but fragile. Perspective is everything. From down here, Earth is simply our home. From up there, it is one strange rock.
Thank you.